Hello everyone and welcome to the MBNP Power Grade tutorial. I'm super excited to take you along this color journey. I've had this Power Grade for about 4 years now, and Mark has tweaked it with me over the last couple of years where we're finessing things every so on so that it can get the look we want out of footage, basically as close to out of the box with a few manipulations. One thing I want to teach you guys is to get away from this idea that once you apply something, that your footage is going to look great out of the box and there's nothing else you have to do. I work primarily as a DP in commercial, music video, documentary, narrative space, and my footage gets colored at the best color houses on planet Earth. I'm talking like Company 3, The Mill, Alter Ego, Red Lab, Art Jail. The colorists earn their day rate by working on the footage. They don't have this magic LUT where you apply it and everything looks great and they don't have to do anything. So I want to teach you guys how to color and doing that underneath the Power Grade and how it has a flow from big to small and working on global changes to finite detail changes, going from primaries to secondaries, and really teaching you about color and how to affect your images, and not just give you something and say, well, click this button and you'll never have to think about color again. I want to get you thinking about how to manipulate your images. With that being said, I have nothing against LUTs, and there is a LUT version of this to go into Premiere Pro. However, because the Power Grade is dissected into so many different nodes, you have so much more flexibility and customization ability to separate out your exposure and your white balance and your hue shift and your shapes. Like, you know what's happening at every step in the chain. So if something doesn't look right, you can get in there and tweak it. Whereas with a LUT, everything's happening in one step. So if it pushes your footage in the wrong direction, it can be very tough to kind of counteract that. So I'm going to be going through a bunch of different clips, probably over an hour's worth. It's going to be extra nerdy, but follow along, keep watching me do it, and you'll learn quite a bit about the color process, even going from like what's working in original color space, what's working in DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate, and what's into Rec 709. So kind of like getting your brain thinking about like which part of the image am I working on when. In this Power Grade, I'm working on the studio version of DaVinci Resolve. The Power Grade will still work totally fine in the non-studio version of Resolve, but if you're serious about color, it's not that expensive. I would pick up the studio version. There's certain things like halation, grain, the film look creator that there's just so many great unlocked plugins that I just couldn't imagine living without, and it's such a cheap and effective price. So I would definitely pick that up for use with the Power Grade. So before we get started, I want to point out that I have an external monitor here, which is my onboard Small HD Cine 7. I have a clean output coming from the Blackmagic Design Ultra Studio Monitor 3G. It's not critical that you have this little box that does a clean feed out for a computer, but what is important when color grading is that you have an external monitor coming out. The reason why I say that is because if you have two monitors displaying what you're color grading, then you can kind of see how everything that you're changing is affecting on two different monitors. If you're only watching it on the viewfinder on your screen, you never know how accurate it is, but if you make a change and it looks good on both monitors, then you have that confidence to know that your changes will relate to a phone, a television, laptop, screen, like all the different places that it can be output in the final screening. So we'll dive right in now. So I'm going to open up Resolve, and you should have the MBNP Power Grade pack already downloaded. And first thing we're going to do, I have a project already started here, and we are going to install the LUTs that are required for the Power Grade. So we're going to go to File, Project Settings, and you're going to go down to Color Management, Open LUT folder. There we go. And then you're going to come here and you're going to take your MBNP LUTs and you're going to drag it over to your LUT folder. Then once it's in there, you can close that out and you're going to go to update lists. So now all the LUTs will be loaded into your DaVinci Resolve, and that includes the main Rec 709 conversion LUT that we grade under, and the kind of 4 creative LUTs that I sometimes toggle on and off at the end if I want a different look. So that should be good. Now let's talk about setting up the project. This has a lot of debate on the internet. I hate to say it, there is no one correct answer to setting up your colors management. If anybody on the internet tells you there is, they're lying, because you can't control the external monitoring at the final source, whether it be from a phone, laptop screen, television, iPad. There is no one color space and gamma that is correct across all platforms. So even Safari, Firefox, Google Chrome, they're going to display the gamma a little bit differently, much like QuickTime or VLC. So what I have found is that in all the color houses that I kind of send my footage to, whether it's Alter Ego, Red Lab, Company 3, they all grade under a Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. And that's kind of the industry standard that we grade underneath. Even if it's not perfect for phones, YouTube, Vimeo, it's kind of the standardized color space. So you'll see a lot of people on YouTube saying grade under Rec 709A or Rec 709 Scene. These are not incorrect color spaces to view your work under, but do understand that when you're color correcting under that, it's only going to be correct for QuickTime playback and YouTube playback. So if your work is primarily going to QuickTime and YouTube, I would say Rec 709 Scene is a great output color space. If you're delivering to clients or you don't know where it's going to end up, Rec 709 Gamma 2.4 is still kind of the industry standard, and that's kind of like your contrast curve that you'll be monitoring underneath. The working space that we're going to be working with is DaVinci Wide, Gamut, and Intermediate. So that's what the power grade is set up for. So if you see these settings on my screen here, this is how I think you should be setting up your project. Or if you know your stuff is only going to YouTube, you can grade under Rec 709 Scene here. So I'm going to do it for Rec 709 Gamma 2.4 because that is the industry standard. And once again, if this is sounding too technical, I would just copy my settings and you can view from there. To reiterate, and you're going to go down and change your 3D lookup table to render in tetrahedral. We're going to update lists, save the project. So now our LUTs are loaded in and our project settings are set to the correct settings. My external monitor here, because I have it going through the Ultra Monitor Studio 3G, it bypasses whatever color influences your operating system is putting on. So, for instance, on a Mac, they have their own kind of workaround to make their color space look like Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. I've gone down the rabbit hole with all of this. If it looks good on this monitor, I have more confidence in this than I do in the viewfinder in Resolve, but I like having both because if it looks good on both, then I know it's going to translate to phone, television, iPad, different browsers, different players, etc. So now that the boring stuff is there and you've followed along so far, we can actually get into doing some of the more interesting color stuff. We're going to first import in our power grade. So you're going to go to, if you don't see it, we're going to go to the color tab at the bottom here. And once we get in the color tab, open up gallery and you're going to go to import and you're going to go to your MBNP power grade folder and you're going to import all of the DRX files. And then so we'll load them in and then you'll notice with the DRX files, I have them targeted for all the different color spaces and gammas, like different cameras that you may or may not be using. So I have, I think, kind of like the most common ones, but if your camera isn't on here, there is a power grade blank option where you can input your own color spaces and your own gamma curves. Let's just load one in and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I have this clip here from a short film I did, and I shot it on the Alexa 35. So I'm going to right click on my Alexa 35 one, and I'm going to put apply grade. So out of the box, it's looking pretty good. Now I want to go under the hood and show everybody kind of what I mean by color space and gamma. When you're monitoring your camera on set, your monitor recognizes a color space, which is dictated by the camera, and the gamma space, which is also dictated by the camera. Most of the time, with your monitors, you're viewing in a Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. So you're not actually seeing the HDR, the 15 stops of dynamic range. It's converting that all into a form that we can visibly see, and that's Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. To say that every camera has a different color space and gamma curve that needs to be set up properly for this power grade to work. So if you just apply the wrong power grade, so let's say I applied Red's power grade to my Alexa 35 footage, you'll see it looks completely different. So make sure that we're applying the correct color space and gamma curve to the footage that you've captured. And if you're curious, if you're thinking like, well, Nick, I don't know which color space or gamma curve my camera's working on, it's pretty easy. You can just go to Google and you say, what is the color space of the Alexa 35? And it should do a pretty reliable job. So it says here, the 35 uses RE wide gamut 4, and then it should say log C4. So log C4 and RE wide gamut C4. RE wide gamut 4 is the color space of this camera. Now, I already knew that, but what I'm saying is if you don't know what your camera is shooting, just go to Google, type in your camera model, and you can change the inputs here. So let's check to first make sure our conversions are correct. If I go to my CST node, which stands for color space transform, you'll notice here that I have RE wide gamut 4 and RE log C4 loaded up into the color space transform. So everything's looking correct here, and you'll see that I'm converting it to DaVinci wide gamut and DaVinci intermediate. So I'm basically telling the program, convert my footage to this other working color space so that my nodes are now working in DaVinci wide gamut and DaVinci intermediate. The other place that's going to be color space aware is going to be your HDR tab. So I do this before the color space transform so that I can work in the original color space. And if you go down to your HDR tab right here and you go to these three dots here, you'll see I already have it tagged with the gamma being RE log C4 and color space of RE wide gamut 4. So when you pick your camera, those will already be inputted for you. So if it's a Sony camera, I have S-Log3. If it has Blackmagic Pocket 6K footage, it's in BMD film with BMD Gamut 5. So just make sure you're picking the correct one when you're applying to your camera. All right, so that is all the technical stuff for a minute. Now let's get into how to manipulate the image and what each step of the power grade is giving you. In general, with color, there are no hard and fast rules. If anybody tells you there is one way to do contrast, one way to do saturation, there's a million different ways to approach different techniques. So if you have a technique you like and you trust, you can input this into the power grade. I'm just showing you how my brain works and how I like to input my different techniques through this power grade. And then in general, I like to go big to small. And by that, I mean I like to do big global changes. And then as we go down the pipeline, I like working on my secondaries, my power windows, my glow. Like I like getting more and finding. So like if you turn on an image and it's too dark, quickly start adjusting your exposure, white balance, and saturation so that the main important parts of your images are looking good, like the skin tone and the overall balance. Don't go to your secondaries and try to affect skin tone. You should try to get those things overall and then affect the smaller things later on. So if we're using this clip, the HDR tab, I think, is the best for global exposure that I've ever seen. So for this clip here with the boy, I would almost say this is too bright for me. So if we go to our HDR tab, under global here, the thing I like about the HDR tab is that this works photometrically. So if you were to work in the primaries tab here and you go to your primaries, if I take my gain up and down, it affects exposure, but I don't really know what this 0.98, 0.97, like photometrically, I don't know what that means. When I work in the HDR tablet, this slider here, it actually is photometrically accurate. And by that, I mean, let's say this shot is half a stop too bright for me. I can take it down 0.5, and that is actually half a stop darker as if I stopped down on the lens or if I went down on EI in camera. So it's a repeatable way to go between your clips to actually increase and decrease exposure. I would say I'm probably too dark here, so I'm going to bring it down maybe 0.3 of a stop here. If you're ever curious on if you like a change you've made in your color grade, I would just on off that specific node. And by doing that, it's Command D, and you can kind of flavor the node on off. In general, if you like the change of something, I would leave it on. And if you on off, and if you're indifferent to it, I would take down the intensity of that. So for instance, if I brought this down, I said, oh, it might be a little too dark, you can walk it back and say, let's do a fifth of the stop like this. So I like that change there. So first thing you're always going to correct with your color correction is your exposure. Next thing is the white balance. So with white balance here, I would say I'm sitting a little on the green side, and that's largely due to the fact that we're in a big green field and green was kicking around everywhere. So if I go to my vector scope, you can kind of see a lot of the images sitting to the left of the skin tone indicator here. So that tells me it is green. So if your resolve isn't showing up the skin tone indicator, you can go to your vector scope here, go to your sliders, and then you can see that you have a toggle on switch with your skin tone indicator here. In general, you want your skin to sit along this line. My preference is actually to sit on the slightly yellower side of skin tone, but that's just my preference. So if we're looking at the white balance here, I'm going to teach you all about something called printer lights, which is what I use a lot of times for white balance. So we're going to go to our WB or our white balance node. And what printer lights are is much similar to how our HDR tab was a repeatable way of doing exposure. The printer lights are a repeatable way of influencing the color or the white balance of your image. So if you go to your color tab up here, you're going to see something that says full, half, and quarter printer lights. It might be grayed out if you don't have this click, so just click on printer light hotkeys, and then that'll unlock those. The easiest way I can explain printer lights is it is an additive and a subtractive way of adding and taking away colors from your image. For instance, if I add a stop of magenta, that's moving it away from the green end, and then it's also increasing exposure. So you'll see if I on off the image here, I'm increasing magenta, but I'm also increasing exposure. And that was in a full stop. So this is something that I can repeatedly do between clips. So if I take that off and we're back to original, to get the same color change, you could minus a full stop of green. Now, this has the same color as the other one, but you'll notice we've gone darker with it. So this is a way of changing your white balance while also affecting the exposure, which is how it would happen in a film stock. So I actually kind of liked the look of adding, let's say, a full stop magenta. So that looks pretty good there. And then I might say it's a bit too much. So if you ever find something's too heavy-handed or hot on a node, you can go over to your opacity or your key output, and you can put it at like 0.7, which basically means do 70% the effectiveness of what I just told you to do. So that's on off in that node, and that's good. I like that. It looks good. So far we've covered exposure and white balance. So we can see if I untoggle those, that's kind of before I made the change, and then here we are now. And then after seeing that, I might take my white balance down to 60%. Perfect. I like that. In the primaries node here, I just have the gain rolled back a bit. And then this is likely where I think you should affect contrast the most. So kind of look at your waveform here. And if you see kind of where the midpoint, so if I see like where the skin is breaking here, it's probably around 0.39 on the waveform. So I use my contrast, my pivot, and my gain wheel the most in my primaries. So here I'm actually good with where the highlights are sitting. It might be a bit too hot, so I can drag that down. And then I like the contrast here, but if you were going to affect it, I would change the contrast node. And then what pivot is where on your waveform or where on your contrast is that contrast like splitting apart. So the lower I go, I'm telling the point like go lower in the waveform. You kind of see it how you're raising up the highlights. You're actually making it brighter because you're telling the program the contrast pivot point should be lower. So you're actually brightening the image and increasing contrast. Conversely, if I tell it start expanding contrast at 0.7 IRE, which would be somewhere around here, you'll noticing that a lot of the image is getting driven down towards the shadows. So I'd say probably somewhere around here is a good pivot point. And then probably a very little contrast here. And you'll notice too, as contrast increases, saturation also increases. Color is kind of always tied with each other, and that contrast and saturation are forever linked. So understand that when you make a contrast change, saturation also changes. When you make a saturation change, exposure changes. So it's that constant push and pull balance between everything. So I'm going to hold here. I think that's good. Once again, I'll on off the node, and I like that. All right. So next in the power grade, I have a couple of shape nodes set up for everybody. So shape nodes are where you can go to your power windows here, which is at the bottom, and you can start doing custom shapes. So I already have a built-in vignette that looks pretty good, but I might add a shape here just to pull down the sky to help bring some attention to our kid's face. So if you ever want to preview what a node is doing, Shift H. Shift H will show you what the power window is affecting. And right now, if you look down here, I have a gradient node or a gradient power window. So I can take a look at this. And then I always find the curves a great way to manipulate the image when I'm doing power windows, because I can really select for what parts of the image I want to keep the same and which parts I want to bring down. So you'll notice in levels here, it's not matching up exactly with what the waveform's doing. So the waveform is showing the Rec 709 output. So you'll notice that, let's say if I have my highlights here, it's kicking in at almost 80 IRE, and you can actually right click and go to show picker RGB value if you need to see that. So you can see up there, that's where my highlights are. But you'll notice that in my curves here, it's showing that it's coming in at 0.6. And the reason why that is because this is working in DaVinci Wide Gamut right now, because that's where we're at with the conversion. So when I pick this, it'll do a point on the curve. So if I want to keep the sky here the same, but I want to drag down everything beneath that, you can see on the top part of my image that the skies remain the same because I've locked a point here, and I'm saying just drag down the grass to make it seem like we had a cloud over there, and we can kind of, bring down the exposure from top of the frame like that so his face pops out more. So I like that shape. The shot isn't moving, but there are many different shapes in the power windows. As we'll go through the clips, you can do custom, you can do a circle, square, you can, build your own line one. So I'll kind of show more about the power windows and the effect you can have there. Moving on, this is something that I kind of do on all my shots, which is just my taste. I always inject a little cyan into the shadows or the neutral parts of the image. And what I've done here is with a color warper, I've kind of said lock off the neutral or locked off the skin tone and the more saturated parts of the image, and anything that's not the skin tone, I want to see teal injected. This comes from a very Company 3 look. It's associated with a lot of movies. I think no matter whether it's commercial, narrative, documentary, corporate, I think it's always fun to inject a little teal into not the skin because it makes the skin pop, or it makes it stand out more. Color is always relative. In my mind, there's no such thing as a bright or a dark image. There are only bright parts relative to dark parts. So if you completely light a scene and everything's at 90 IRE, someone would say that's a really bright image, but to me, there's no focus because there's no dark spots to make the bright spots feel bright and the dark spots feel dark. So when I put a little teal in, it makes the skin just stand out a little more. And it's not because I'm raising the exposure of that person's face. It's because I'm saying, let's add some color contrast and don't focus on the things around the skin. So this perceptibly pops more. So you can see if I on off that node, how the skin is staying neutral, but the grass, the sky, all the kind of like shadowy neutral parts are getting a little bit of that teal injection. And I think it's just a very classy way of doing a teal and orange look that always makes it pop more. So I also have a lighter version of this, which works better with some color spaces. You can see up in the sky here. And then this is one of the nodes that you might like the taste, you might not like it. So you can put it on and you can say, Nick, I like it, but I want to see it at 20%. So you can go to your output node and you go key output, maybe you only want to feel 20%. You might have another shot and you're like, Nick, I love it, but I actually want it to be more aggressive. And you can put it at 80% and then on off it there. So I think that a 0.5 looked very nice there. Moving on, we're going to subtractive saturation. So subtractive saturation is a method of increasing the vibrancy of your shot without getting into that kind of like cartoony, almost like blocky skin looking color. So it doesn't look like an Oompa Loompa. So if I go to my primaries and I crank up the saturation node here, it starts to look kind of funny to me. It starts to look less filmic. Things are breaking. So I don't like to change that in my primaries. What I've done here with subtractive saturation is what you do is you change your color space to hue, saturation, and vibrancy, and then you channel it to just channel 2. So your gain wheel actually works as your saturation change. So if you roll up the gain, you can see saturation is increasing and exposure is actually decreasing. So you look at my waveform here, and exposure is slightly going down, and we're getting a richer color. So I'm not necessarily saying I want it for this clip, but if your clip needs more saturation, I would try doing it in the subtractive saturation node and turning up the gain on this node, because it just makes it pop a little bit more than if you were to go in your primaries and increase the saturation slider. So I'm going to reset this because I don't think I need it on this clip, but that's where you do that. All right, so moving along, I'm going to go to something I've created called the pre-hue versus hue node. So in the hue versus hue, I'm ever so slightly changing the hues to kind of move the skin tone towards this middle line here, which is like where I like my skin tones to sit. It's kind of like just to the left or just to the yellow side of our skin tone indicator. So what I'm saying is here, anything that's a little red, move it towards this orange line, and anything that's a little yellow, move it towards this orange line. So it's very subtle, but the way it works is it can be applied to a bunch of different cameras, a bunch of different clips, and it's non-destructive. I know a lot of people out there use the color slice tool, which is very powerful and it's very good, but I don't find that it translates between clips really well. Like you really have to customize it because it's so specific to a hue that as soon as you apply the look to a different clip, it breaks apart easily or you might get artifacting. Whereas these curves, they're so gentle and move the hues around that you can almost apply it to any clip and it will give you a more repeatable result and feather in a little bit nicer. So you don't have to touch anything in this node. I'm just kind of giving everybody an overall sense of where my mind is at when I'm building this. So the other thing I'm doing is in my hue versus saturation, I'm saying take the saturation of the skin tone down a little bit because in general, I like desaturated skin a bit. So I'm saying apply this in the DaVinci Wide Gamut intermediate space before we do our Rec 709 conversion. And I'm also saying our hue versus lume, let's bump up the yellow parts or the skin, and anything that's kind of blue or green, let's bring it down. So once again, very subtle, but it just perceptibly makes things pop and kind of seem more three-dimensional. Next in our list, we're going to have my main kind of vignette or power window, which is my in and out. So these two nodes are linked. And you can see here, if you go to your power window, you can change the shape of this. So I would say for this shot, make sure under your tools here that you're on power window. If you're on qualifier, that's not going to be visible. So go to your power window tool here, and then I'm just going to tighten that shape up. And then if I do, I'll off that. If you do Command D, you can almost see that the in part of our image is popping out and the out part of our image is going down. So as I on off these nodes, these two are linked. So if I just do the out node, it's just the out one. If I do the in one, both are turning on and off. And then, so what's going on here is I have a single point of sharpness on the inner part of our power window. I have a slight lift in my levels, and the way I've done that is with editable splines. So if you go to your three dots here and you put on editable splines, and then you click this, this is like a more gentle way of affecting your curves because you can affect it from a longer angle, so you get a more subtle lift. So you can see there, it's just ever so slightly going on there. So I like that. And then the other thing I have is I have a little bit of contrast added to the inner part of my vignette. As human beings, how we detect sharpness or what we're drawn to in an image is usually what is the most contrasty. So what I've told this power grade to do is apply a little more contrast to the inner part of my vignette. And then on my outer part of my vignette, I'm saying bring down the gain, bring down the mids, and you can even bring down the offset if you want to feel that a bit more. My general rule of thumb for vignettes is if you look away from your monitor and look back, you shouldn't be able to tell that there's a vignette when you first look at something, but if you take it away, you immediately miss it. So if I were to do something like this, I can feel that vignette with my eyes. So that probably tells me I'm a little too heavy-handed. I almost want to take it to a place where I can barely tell it's there and then on off it. So look away from the monitor, look back. If you can't tell it's there, that probably means you're in a good place. If you think it's still too heavy-handed, this is where you can go to your key output and you can kind of say, okay, well, I like this, but it's too heavy. Let's 0.5, which means let's half intensity that. So let's leave that at 0.7 intensity. So the next node I have is the halation node. I'm a big fan of halation because it's one of the film characteristics I like. With this power grade, my goal was to never emulate every aspect of film perfectly. I like the color and the contrast curve of film, but then there are certain things like the film damage, the gate weave, some of the grains. I like a more modern, kind of contrasty, punchy look, and film doesn't always have all the characteristics I'm looking for. Halation is one I like, and I have it separated in a node here. DaVinci Resolve actually has a great halation plugin that I have set up here for everyone, where it's super easy to pick your threshold on where you want the halation to start. So right now, I would want the halation to be just on the hotter parts in the sky and like the specular highlights on his face. So if you click on your effects tab here, that'll bring up the halation plugin. And if you click on view isolated regions, you can see which parts are being affected. So if I bring my threshold down, I'm basically saying apply halation to everything in the image, which looks like hot garbage. But if I bring that back to being just affect the hottest parts of the highlights, I think that looks a little more classy. So if we full screen here and we go on and off, you can kind of see in his shoulder there, the little halation that's getting added, which I think is a nice soft way of rolling in kind of a more filmic attribute. And I can probably take the threshold down a bit to feel that a bit more. So we take it off. Perfect. And you can see it around his ear as well. It's very subtle. And if you want to feel the halation more, just crank up the strength, come down to his shoulder. You can see an on-off of that right there. Now, it's a little too heavy-handed for me, so I'm going to reset it back to where it was. I also take out the saturation of my halation because I like the glow that halation gives, but I don't necessarily want that red saturated halation. So this is where we're at so far with the power grade, and I think that's looking pretty good. All right, so to recap, almost everything we've been doing is working in DaVinci Wide Gamut. That's the kind of big color space that all of these nodes after the color space transform have been working under. So the HDR tab is working on the original color space, which is Arilog C4, because I always like to affect my exposure with the camera's working color space. Then everything from white balance, primaries, shapes, the cyan look, subtractive saturation, pre-hue versus hue, my in and out, and my halation, these are all working in DaVinci Wide Gamut and are color space aware. So if I kind of take all of these on and off, you'll see how much work we've done so far. This is kind of just the Rec 709 LUT right now. The Rec 709 LUT is good, but it is not the end-all be-all of what can be manipulated in an image. Colorists are not just applying a Rec 709 look. Like, see what the change is when we've gone from Rec 709 to how much thicker and punchy and minute changes and finessed we've gotten with just the little work we've done in the nodes there. Next node we have is our main Rec 709 conversion. So this is the MB-NP Power Grade LUT. This is the one that's taking it from DaVinci Wide Gamut and putting on the filmic look. It is doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but now to note, after this conversion, we are now working in Rec 709. So this is these nodes after the Rec 709 LUT. What that means is we're not working on the wide color space like this. Now the changes that we do, they're going to affect things greater, so we have to be a little softer with them. So the pre-hue versus hue is different than the post-hue versus hue. Even though I'm doing similar corrections, they're affecting the image in a much different way. So now I'm working on the Rec 709 space. I'm going to take down the saturation of our skin. I'm also going to swing his skin a little bit more red. So I'm going to move this over like that. I have a node here set for the black level. I always like to set my black level of my image after the Rec 709 because some of the Rec 709 LUTs, they'll cap your black level. So if I'm looking at my waveform here, I generally like my black level to sit at 0 IRE or the bottom of the waveform. So I might just in my curves, take off editable splines. I'll drag that down to where the black point is just kissing the bottom of the waveform. So if I on off like that, I might say it's a little too heavy handed, but as we know, we can half that intensity and that's looking good. Also, if you aren't familiar with a waveform, this is kind of 0 IRE, this is 100 IRE, and what it does is it gives you a visual representation of the exposure of everything in your image. I kind of float between the waveform and the vector scope. So the vector scope tells me kind of the color cast of my image. If I was to add a node here and change my white balance, if I go to my offset and I drag it down to super blue, super cyane, so you'll see in the vector scope, a lot of my image is sitting in this cyane blue range, and you can see on your image, it's telling you that too. But the vector scope is a way of kind of like seeing global overall color structure and where the skin is sitting. So I'm kind of always toggling back between that and the waveform. I use the Parade less, just because I think you can get information from the color and the exposure, for me, better between waveform and vector scope. So I set my black level after my Rec 709. I also have a kind of a post-look node here. This is where I would be kind of injecting warmth into highlights. Like I would be playing around with the primary wheels and changing that here, but I don't think I need it in this clip. So you can see I would work with the primary wheels. See if you want to look. You don't need that here. The other thing that I've done, which I really like, is I kind of have like 4 really subtle post-Rec 709 looks that I'll apply to a lot of my clips. So these are meant to be one or the other. Don't ever turn all 4 of these on. This is meant to be like, okay, I like this one versus this one. So I have my pastel look, and then that kind of warms up the highlights a bit and desaturates the skin. I like that one. Moody blue kind of just ups the blue of the image like that. My earthy look makes things a little bit more kind of greeny yellowy tone. And then my Fuji lift will decrease contrast and lift the black level. So as you can tell, these are all pretty subtle and you can affect the output here. I think for this one, I like the pastel look. Then I have my last kind of like finishing nodes here. I have a built-in sharpness here, which kind of just helps pluck the eyes. There are certain film aspects that I like. I still like a sharp image. So even when I'm going for something filmic and grainy, I want the eyes to pop. Like I don't want to feel like it was soft focus. So I have sharpness dialed in here, but you can Command D if you want to toggle that on and off. Glow is something that kind of like softens up the colors for me. So what I have here is I have my glow set to a soft light, and then I have my threshold brought down, and then I'll kind of crank it up. So what this does is kind of like thickens up the image and the color. So you can kind of see that's off and then that's on. You can kind of see that there is kind of almost like a pro mist filter is getting added, which I kind of like it here. It's very dreamy, and I might take my blend down to like 0.3. So I like that. Next is the Film Look Creator. The Film Look Creator, it is a good plugin, but what I think it does the best is a bleach bypass. What bleach bypass is, it's a way of kind of taming down the saturation of your image while increasing contrast and giving that more filmic curve that you would see in like Children of Men, a lot of a lot of movies to kind of neutralize colors. So especially for this image, I'm going to turn my bleach bypass up. And I think that looks great. So you see if I on off that node, I think that just makes this image pop quite a bit. So within this kind of plugin, which if you're not seeing it, you just click on effects up here. I have the effects blend turned all the way down because I don't want this plugin to apply any halation, gate weave, anything like that. I really just want to use this one for bleach bypass and maybe richness on another clip, not this one. And then the last step of the chain is my grain. So grain's going to be the toughest to see over this video, but if we full screen here, you can kind of see, we'll crank up the strength. So once again, you go to effects nodes. I have a 35 mil grain applied. I'm going to crank up the strength. So if we full screen, you can kind of see an on off of the grain there. The type of grain I like is usually really small, fine grain. I don't like big, chunky 16 mil grain. And if you go here to grain only, it can give you a preview of what the grain is doing. So if you're having trouble seeing it, you can kind of get a sense for, okay, that's the grain strength. This is the grain size. I like a small grain. I like heavy, small grain. We'll take that off. So this one is more to taste. And then you'll also see that there's some debate online of like, well, your grain node should be earlier in the power grade because that's more resemblant to film. But I really want to drive home the point that none of this is meant to emulate film. This is supposed to be the look that I have found is tried and true on the projects I want. So I don't like putting my grain earlier on in the structure because then the grain is getting affected by your saturation and your curves. And I don't like colorized grain. I like to have it almost very neutral. So I put it at the end of the chain so that it sits on top of all the manipulations that we've been doing. I would say this is looking pretty good. So you want to see, this is kind of the log out of camera, and then Shift D will do a bypass overlook on everything we've done. So this is off, this is on, and then I'll show everybody what the nodes we've affected are. So if I'm looking here, I'm going to select for all these guys. All right, and then I'm going to go off. So this is right now our color space transform, which is taking our camera space to our DaVinci Wide Gamut and the Rec 709 LUT. So this is just the LUT out of the box. It looks pretty good. And then this is with the nodes with simple manipulations. How much more of a finessed, call it cinematic, but more polished, just popping image we can get in very little time. So I went pretty slow on this clip, but I want to show, I'm going to do a few more clips so you can see my mindset. But basically we're working from exposure to white balance to saturation. We're doing some shapes, applying a cyan look. Don't touch the hue versus hue. We're changing the size of our in and out to make it pop. Check the threshold of your halation. Don't touch the LUT. Keep these the same. Maybe change your black level. Sample each of these looks to see if you're liking them, and then play around with the opacity and kind of what we're liking here. So once you find what you like, this workflow can be repeatable between clips very easily. Let's bring up another clip, and I'll go a little bit faster this time so you can see how I can manipulate things, and I'll kind of show you some other cool things along the way. So this is another shot from the same short film. So I'm going to step on a frame where he looks like he's in focus. There we go. That one looks in focus. So once again, this is Alexa 35. So I'm going to go to my gallery and I'm going to apply the Alexa 35 power grade. So right now it's looking too bright. So where do we change exposure? It's in our HDR tab. So I'm going to go to my HDR, and remember, this is photometric. So when I say, let's bring it back half a stop, go down 0.5, and this means I'm down half a stop. Command D will on off that. That's looking pretty good. The other thing that I like about the HDR tab is you can select specific parts of the image and manipulate them. So what I'm used to seeing colorists do is they'll pull a qualifier of, let's say, the highlights and pull them back. I don't like this method because it doesn't repeat between clips really well. So in our HDR tab, it's broken into, I think, 6 sections. You have black, dark, shadow, light, highlight, specular. So if you look at the circle beside the section, as long as you have your color space and gamma tagged correctly, it will break apart your image or select parts of your image based on the original color space. So if I click on the circle here, it'll preview which part of the image you're affecting. So you can see I'm clicking on the highlight, and it's saying all of this region here is considered highlights in the ARRI Log C4. I'm even picking up a bit of his forehead here, which I'm fine with. So after I've changed my global exposure, let's say a 1/6 of stop down, I might think this part of the image is too bright and distracting for me. You could grab a shape, bring it down with curves, but I want to show you in the HDR tab how interesting it is to affect this in the original high dynamic range color space. So I'm going to say this, and I'm going to go dial back just the highlights like that. So if I do an on off, you can see how much detail we're getting back in the sky there. I'm going to select for my speculars. Now that's doing just the sky. So if I pull that back, look at how much information we're bringing back without having to pull a qualifier. Like, that is wild. That's one node we've affected. The white balance is looking good to me, but let's go to our vector scope. The vector scope is telling me it might be a touch green. So we're going to go to our white balance node, and then I'm going to go to color, half printer light, green minus. So we're putting magenta in, but decreasing exposure. So there we go. So I'll on off that, and you can see how the vector scope, I'm just moving the overall color cast of the image closer to our skin line because we're trying to affect big changes before I'm selecting the hues of things. That's good. I like that. So this is with 2 nodes we changed. Boom, out of the box. How much thicker, chunkier, more cinematic that's looking. Primaries are looking good. I might even take down my midtones 1 point here. So primary wheels are good from that. Once again, working big to small. Shapes, I would say, because the shot's locked off here, I'm going to grab my gradient. And on the day, we just couldn't flag this wall down. So I'm going to take this, going to go to my curves, get the qualifier, select here, and I'm going to drag down just this section. So it's almost as if I brought in a flag, and that might be a little too heavy-handed. So I'm going to say, let's do 70% of that, Command D on off. That's looking good. Cyan look, I love it. Yeah, I mean, dealer's choice on this one, but almost every clip, if I turn on and off the cyan, my brain likes it more. Like, it looks more like a finished product that I would see at a proper color house. So that one is for you to decide. Saturation level's good. I don't need to touch that. Not touching. In and out, I'm going to go to my power windows, and I'm just going to finesse the shape so it's really focused on the face. Very subtle. Face is popping out. Love it. Halation. Remember, we go to our effects here, and we're going to set our threshold to just the highlights on his forehead there. I like that. We can take off the view isolated range. Don't touch our LUT. Post hue versus hue looks good. Let's see where our black level's sitting in our waveform. I can drag that down a bit. And see there, it's just touching. And then let's sample our looks. I like that. Just adds a little bleach bypass and warmth into the highlights. Fuji lift lifts the shadows ever so slightly. And then once again, with all of these look nodes, they're meant to be very subtle because we're adding it in the Rec 709 space. But if you think it's too heavy-handed, go to your output and you can dial it back or you can crank it up. It's more on the key output, so we'll hold it there. Sharpness looks good. Glow, I like. Film look, I think we can up the bleach bypass on this look. Something like that. And then grain will go up a bit. So there we go. We went much quicker on this clip, and we can go to zoom to fit. If you're ever want a full screen, it's Shift F to full screen the image. And then you can kind of see how quickly we balanced that image. So I'll show everybody what the Rec 709 looks like. I'm going to select my nodes here. So this is the Rec 709 out of the box. And then this is where we were able to get in the color grade. So pretty big changes. I think it's pretty cool. All right, let's go to something that's not Alexa 35 footage, because I feel like some of you are going to be sitting there being like, Nick, this is all well and good, but this is your footage. How is this going to apply to my camera? So we actually have an AOD member who's sent in more Verite sports footage. Chadrick sent it in, and this is shot on a Blackmagic Ursa 12K. So I want to show people how that works. So I'm going to grab a clip here that I think is I'm not good with football. Saints? Maybe? Chiefs? Someone's going to chew me out for this one. I'm not sure which football team it is. But, okay, so we have some Blackmagic Ursa footage here, and we're going to go to our gallery and our LUTs, and we're going to go to the Pocket 6K is going to be the closest. Blackmagic footage is a little bit weird in that they have a ton of different color spaces and gamma curves. So with Blackmagic footage, you want to go to your RAW tab, you want to go to clip, and you want to see what it is processing the shot as. So right now it's saying the color science is Gen 5 and the gamma is Blackmagic Design Film. So if I go to my color space transform, your input color space is wide gamut 4 and 5, which is correct. So you want the latest gamut, and then the gamma would be Film Gen 5. So this is actually correct for the Ursa Mini 12K. And out of the gate, I mean, looks pretty good with footage that like has not been lit properly. It's just, stadium lighting. Like it has an already almost very commercial movie-like look to it. So exposure-wise, I would probably say I'm good. But if we wanted to change that, you do that in your HDR tab. And you can go up, down. I might even turn it down a bit just to thicken things up. And then, as we saw before, I might look at these stadium lights and be like, ooh, these got too hot on us. So I'm going to select for my highlights and be like, let's drag those back a bit. And if I click on my 3 dots, you'll see, because I select the Blackmagic one, that my color space and my gamma are already tagged for the correct space. So you don't even have to do that. White balance feels a little greeny to me. I'm just looking at like the green of it looks like there's a bit of a green tinge on their uniforms. And if I go to the vector scope, it actually looks pretty good. But I might say half printer light, green minus, neutralize that out a bit. So we'll apply that to our white balance node, green minus, and that just ever so slightly sucks that green out there. Primaries look good to me. I don't think the contrast needs to be changed at all. That's good. And then let's lock on a frame that we like and see if we like our cyan look. Yeah, I don't know. Call me crazy, but I just love the little teal injection into every shot. So it might not work for everyone, but you can on-off it. That's the power of the power grade. Saturation levels look good to me. Don't touch. In, out. We're going over a large clip, so I might just want to keep this as a wide shape. If you want to preview what the shape is doing, Shift H. And then if we went to our out, it shows the out. So Shift H will preview what a node's doing. For our halation, I might want to change the threshold. That's pretty good there. Let's hold there. Don't touch. Let's check our black level. Might be able to come down a hair. Boom. And then I might take my primaries and go up a gamma point. Let's hold there. Sharpness. The Ursa Mini is already pretty sharp, so let's take that down. Glow looks fun. Once again, I'm going to play around with my bleach bypass. I like that. And then grain will go up a bit. So this is basically off the field sports footage, and I don't know. I'm pretty impressed by this camera, but like just how thick and full and cinematic this is looking just out of the gate. Okay, so this clip is looking pretty good. Let's see how it applies to another Ursa Mini 12K clip. So we're going to grab a still, and when you grab a still, you can either export the still for checking on your phone or sending off to a director, or you can apply it to another clip. So I'm going to go to, let's say, this basketball stuff, which is shot on the same camera. And if I right click on the node and I go to apply grade, it's going to apply all the changes that we did on the football clip. So the HDR transfers over, all the nodes should be that. So it's looking pretty good out of the box. I would say maybe a little bright. Let's check to make sure our color space is the same. I'm going to reset this. There we go. So sometimes with the raw tab, if you transfer over a look, it transfers over the raw of the previous clip. So just make sure to reset to the camera settings. So this looks a little bit better here. On my global, I'm actually going to brighten this one up, maybe a quarter stop. Let's go fourth of a stop. That looks good. White balance looks good. Primaries looks good. So we're going through the clip. So that highlight might be getting to be a bit much on the dunk. So I might go into my HDR and see if I can select just for that. Nope. Let's go. Yep. Highlights. And I'm going to take those back. Perfect. Don't need any shapes. I like the cyan look. Saturation looks good. That looks there. I might actually increase the contrast to this. It's just when it flares out. When we go away from the light, the contrast looks good. Yeah, this looks great. Black level looks good. It's touching the bottom. Kind of like the earthy tones here. No sharpness needed. Yeah. So see how quickly that transferred over? That looks great. And then if I grab a still here and we transfer it to another Ursa Mini clip. So this one looks a little bit warmer to me and brighter. So we can go to our HDR. Let's say, let's bring it down here. And then, so there's a couple of ways to combat this warmness. We can either switch our global in our HDR tab and kind of like pull the cool like that. But the problem with that, it does a good job, but I moved my mouse or I moved my cursor just a little bit and so much of the image got affected. So I might reset that, reset my exposure here, and then go to my white balance. And then I'm probably say the image just looks a little too yellowy. So I'm going to add a printer light of blue. And now that's better, but I think we're too magenta-y. So I'm going to add a half of green, and then you can kind of see the before and after. I'm just sucking out some of that yellow right there. So that looks good. And then boom, clip transferred over nicely. Looks great. Good job, Chadrick. Looks great. Okay, let's try it on one of Mark's Sony clips. So I have one here of a gentleman running, and I have two Sony ones built in. I have a regular S-Log3 power grade that you can apply here, but I know some people like to overexpose by a stop and do the expose to the right and then pull it back. So I do have a -1 stop, which I think looks better. So you can see out of the gate right here with this shot. So the only thing different is in your HDR tab, we're pulling it back a stop. So go to our CST, we have our right gamma and color space tagged. So this shot is already looking pretty good. But let's check a few things. So it might be sitting a little on the cool end. So I might bring some warmth to the image. And so I'll go to my white balance, and to bring some warmth, you can either subtract cyan or add yellow. I don't think I want to add exposure. So what I'm going to do is maybe full printer light cyan minus, and that'll inject some warmth into the image. And now we might be sitting a little too magenta there. So what I'm going to do is half printer light green plus, and then let's go to a half printer light yellow plus. As you can kind of see, I'm moving everything in steps, and that looks phenomenal there. Okay, so let's go to our HDR tab. I like where the skin is sitting. Exposure is good. I almost think the sky is too hot. So we're going to go see where our light is being affected. And I think light is digging up too much of his skin. So I'm going to check highlights. That's looking like it's doing good stuff. So go to our waveform, and we're going to pull back just the highlights. And you can see on the waveform how it's only affecting this top part or the light part of the image in highlights. And then I'll go to speculars and I'll peel those back a bit too. That looks great. Okay, and then I might even thicken up the contrast a bit. So in my primary node, I'm going to contrast just a little bit like that. Command D to on off. That looks good. Don't need any shapes in this one. Cyan might be a bit too heavy on the buildings back there, so I'll do a 25% opacity. I like that. Saturation, we might be able to increase, so we're going to go to our gain and our subtractive saturation, and then you can just see that like the thickness of the shirt denses up right there. Don't change. In, out. Let's just check the shape. Keep it on his face. I'm going to take down the highlights in primary using the curves. Halation, I'm really going to want to check to make sure my threshold is at a good spot. That's good. Black level, let's bring it down to 0. I like that. Let's see what a Fuji lift looks like. I'll bite on that, up the intensity. Just helps dig into his skin a bit. Sharpness will keep up because we're running with it, so I'll take critical sharpness where we can get it. Glow, I like that. Film look. I don't know if I want the bleach bypass in this one because I want to keep the orange tone, and then grain is feeling good. All right. Other thing I want to point out is I have a noise reduction node built in to the power grade. I'm going to be honest. Most clips now don't need noise reduction. The cameras have gotten so good that if you're on a Sony, you can be at 12,800 or 800 and it looks pretty clean to me. But if you need noise reduction, I do have some built-in subtle noise reduction here with temporal and spatial noise reduction. So depending on what your clip will need, you can subtly bring that in. In the spatial, I tend to take away just the chroma noise because I like the way luma noise looks. So dealer's choice on that one. You might have to turn up this one to, let's say, 10. But yeah, I don't tend to reach for noise reduction too much. So it's built in there, but I would only use it on clips that absolutely need noise reduction because nothing in our power grade node chain should cause noise. So this clip looks awesome. And we'll do a quick sample of what the Rec 709 versus our power grade looks like. So I select for the nodes I've adjusted. And then so out of the box, this is like the Rec 709 Sony conversion. And then this is us. So quite a big difference. That looks great. Let's go to a quick Venice clip. That I did on a robot that was upside down, so that's why it's inverted. So we'll do S-Log 3, and as is tradition, Nick underexposed. So let's see how quickly we can do that. Let's flip. There we go. So I undercooked this one, but I don't want that to be a worry to anyone because our HDR tab cameras are so good now. I'm just going to take this and I'm going to lift it, probably something like that. That looks good. And then probably sitting a little too warm. And our vector scope is, it's pretty good, but I'm going to take my global and I just want to soak that skin a little less warm. So something like that. So that's quickly after HDR tab. I did the white bounce in the HDR tab. I kind of like where that's sitting, but the highlights on the glove, I like it. Okay, perfect. Primaries are good. Cyan, I love the way the cyan just keeps the skin neutral, but it kicks into this backlight here. My in and out, we'll go to our power window. Boom, there, that looks good. Halation, I probably want to affect the halation just on his hair there. So yeah, something like that looks good. And if we zoom in, if you command plus it, you can kind of see, yeah, just a little bit of halation that comes around there. And we can probably increase the strength on this clip. Boom, 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 boom. All right, that looks good. Black level's already sitting where I want it. Probably Moody Blue for this one, to be honest, because I already have such strong blue tones that I just want to push things into that like cinematic blue world. Sharpness stays, glow stays. I like the film look, and then 35 grains. So there we go. How quickly we balanced Venice footage. Excellent. Okay, moving along, let's do some Ronin 4D footage. And so this is some Sebum stuff that Mark and I shot. This was him. So we'll pick there we go. That's a good looking frame there. Let's go to our Ronin 4D and see how quickly out of the box. All right, so it looks good, but it looks a little hot to me. So HDR, let's bring it back. Let's say stop. And then saturation's looking a bit much on his skin. He is a very tanned fellow. So in my primaries, I'm going to come down and I'm going to go to like 43 on my saturation. I'm going to take down my gain. That's looking good. White balance looks good, but we'll confirm on vector scope. Looks very balanced to me. I like the cyan here, and I might actually turn it up a bit just to, like, because we're in a boring parking lot, just to give it a bit of a look in the neutral grays. Then I really want to vignette down the parts that aren't crisp, so I'm going to tighten my window up, and then I'm almost going to go to my curves, select for that level there, pull back, and that might be a bit too much. And halation, let's check for threshold. Let's move it up to something like that. Let's try Moody Blues. I like that. Sharpness can probably come off because the Ronin 4D is pretty sharp. Let's bring up our... That just helps round things out a bit. Film look, that looks pretty good. And then under my post hue versus hue, I might take down his skin. So hue versus saturation, kind of selected for it. And then I'm just kind of ever so slightly pulling back his skin tone. And then another little trick sometimes I'll do is I'll desaturate just the shadows. So there we go. And you can see this is out of the box with the color grade. So that was pretty quick. Yeah, that's great. We'll full screen it, zoom to fit. And I know I'm whizzing through these clips, but the more you guys watch, the more you'll be able to like quickly see what I'm manipulating to apply to your footage. So I'm trying to think what other clips would be a good example. I have some Alexa Mini footage here, or Alexa Mini LF. So you would go to your ARRI Log C3, which is Alexa Mini /LF. So let's apply it. Looks pretty good out of the box. Maybe I underexposed a bit, which is pretty standard for me. So I'm gonna raise it third of a stop. Gamma and color space are tagged correctly. I'm gonna check the power window, move it over, and then the teal might be a bit much here. Dealer's choice. I like it, but let's say we go to 0.25 version of that. Let's check our halation threshold and something like that. So it's just the highlighted areas. Sharpness stays, glow. Let's try Moody Blue. Ooh, I like that, but it might be a bit too heavy, so we'll 0.25 that. And then there we go. Looking very Netflixy. So so if I do the on off with all this stuff, you can kind of see what the Rec 709 is like versus the power grade. There's Rec 709 and the power grade. So sub little punches that just pushes it more into that split toning, make the skin pop type world. And then if we grab a still there and we apply it to another clip from the same shoot, let's see how it applies over. And we do that, and it's like, great. I'm a big fan of anything that transfers over without any big manipulations or cracking. So you're not going to see me reach for the qualifier too often unless it's like end of the chain. Oh my God, we have to fix this. But because I like working quickly and getting reliable looks. So that looks great. Let's do some Nikon ZR footage. So Nikon this is a great camera. Footage might come out of the box a little yellow. So this is footage that Mark shot. And then let's go to our Nikon PowerGrade. All right, so that's looking pretty good. When Mark sent me the footage, I actually didn't know what color space and gamma. So once again, you just go to what is the Nikon ZR color space, and Google will tell you the proper tag. So it's red wide gamut RGB, and I actually don't think it's log 3G10 for the gamma curve. I think that's for red cameras. It's actually N-Log for the Nikon ZR. So it's these two here. So this is looking pretty good, but for some reason, this camera always looks a little yellow out of the box to me. And you can tell from the vector scope here, it's like skewing off this way. So exposure wise, I'm feeling pretty good. I might bump it a little bit, and then I might peel back the contrast a bit in the HDR. But you see how it's looking very yellow? In my white balance, rather than using printer lights, I might use my hue shift to see if I can swing that line, maybe like that, a little bit less yellow like that. And then I'm going to probably start wanting to pull some more neutral blues into it, like that with my HDR. So between these two nodes, we've gone through something that looks a little more straw-like to a little more neutral balanced. I really like the cyan in this one, so I'm going to crank it up. That looks good. I would even say white balance. We can take another full printer of cyan. And then a half printer light magenta plus. And then let's see what happens if we go to swinging that hue more like that. So you can see between these two nodes how we went from something very yellowy to a little more neutral balance. Now I really want to pluck the kit out. So in my shape, I'm going to do a custom shape, and I'm almost going to match the way the light falls like from this window. So I'm going to draw a custom shape like this. There we go. And I'm going to soften it, do an inside, outside. Shift H shows what we're seeing, and we'll feather that in a bit more. And then I'm going to invert it. So I'm just affecting what's outside there. And then I am going to take one step of mid-tone down. So essentially, we'll take off the power window. So I'm just ever so slightly lowering the stuff that's not the kid. Subtractive saturation looks good. We might be able to pump a bit more thickness in there through our gain. Zoom to fit. Love it. In, out. Probably just focus this more on our kid. Halation. Let's check threshold. Something like that. Ooh, I like booty blue here. Okay, so we're going to go with... let's see what earthy does. No, I like moody blue. Sharpness can stay. Glow, I might up a bit. And then I'm probably going to do bleach bypass just to soak down some of the orange in his skin. And then I'll up the global blend in that. Cool. All right. That is looking great. And then let's see how that applies to... let's say another shot from the Nikon ZR. See what I got to change. So there we go. Looking pretty good. This one, I might take down the gain. Do that with my curves in my primaries. And then saturation is just looking a bit heavy for me. So in my primaries, I might take that down to, let's say, 40. On off, I'm going to take this shape and reset it because that's more for the other shot. And then I'm going to focus this in on our girl. And then still probably curb back that, and then might take down the contrast a bit in my HDR, because that's working on original color space. And then boom. And then I'll kind of show you what I mean when I say that the Nikon ZR looks a little yellowy out of the box. So if I leave on just the Rec 709 conversion, so you can see there, it's almost got like a very greeny yellow tint to it. And if I go to my vector scope, you can see it like spiking off to that yellow zone. And now we've corrected it more to be within that kind of skin tone line in cyane. So yeah, this is looking great. Last clip I'll do for now would be, let's do something a little more bright and poppy so it isn't just moody images I'm showing you. This was a commercial for Breton Crackers I shot, and this will kind of be the last one I go over in the main tutorial. So it was Alexa 35. So I'm going to take this, apply it. We shot for 16:9, so I'm just going to zoom in like this, pick a frame I like, and even out of the box, looking good. Might increase exposure a little bit in my primaries. I might increase contrast, but not a ton of it. So if I on off that, white balance is looking nice and balanced. I like the cyan look. In and out, I'm going to focus it to just the area. Shift H shows you what we're affecting. That's our out. I might actually increase that vignette a bit by decreasing offset. Halation, let's check threshold. View isolated regions, there we go. And then I'm going to increase that because I don't want to be only pulling off the hottest in the back. There we go. That's cool. And let's go through our looks. Too warm. Yeah. Then maybe Fuji lift. You know what? I'm going to go without any looks here. I like what just the Rec 709 is giving me. Yeah, this is a great commercial look here. So you can kind of see how we can get brighter looks. If we wanted to go even brighter, let's go to the waveform. I might try it through my glow node and upping the gain and the gamma to give it that almost like very airy look. And we'll dial that back a bit. And then I don't need my bleach bypass as much here. So there we go. So that's how you can see it can apply to a more commercially look too. So I find this power grade very versatile. I apply it to a bunch of different types of clips, no matter whether it's narrative, commercial, doc, music video. It kind of just, it works. The last thing I would say is exporting the clips is kind of important. So there's kind of two main ways you'll be exporting the clips. You're either going to be doing it directly to an MP4, which would be going to Instagram, Vimeo, YouTube, or you'll be shooting it out as a ProRes to likely go back to Premiere Pro to link up to an editor's file. So if you're doing it directly, like this is your final export, I would go to MP4 and then H.264 is your codec, because that has great compression already. Check off use hardware acceleration if available. Just match your resolution and timeline frame rate. For quality, don't let it do restrict or automatic. Go to restrict to, and then I usually do 40,000 for an HD. If you're exporting at a 3840 by 2160, I would do 80,000 kilobytes. Leave the encoding profile auto, do multipass to check for any errors. And under your advanced settings, I would take off bypass, re-encode when possible, and then force debear and enable compatibility with legacy players. So this is kind of the settings I would do. And then to export clips, let's say if you wanted to do them all, you would go to mark in, right click, mark in, right click, mark out, and then you can add to render queue. And it's going to ask you where you want to record, and you can say a drive, and then you export out there. If you just want to do one clip, You right click on a clip, say render this clip, and then it'll set the in and out points for you. Add to render queue, good to go. Now, for a lot of times, I'm not doing my final exports from Resolve. I'm actually linking them back to an editor who's doing the final export. So in that case, I would be going to QuickTime and then Apple ProRes, and then choose your flavor of ProRes. If it's final export, you can do 422 HQ. If it's, something that's not living on that, then you can go down to an LT. But resolution, that all stays the same. Click use constant bitrate. Auto, all this stuff is good. Force sizing to highest quality. And this should be good to go here. And for your file, you can either do custom name. If you're doing everything as individual clips, then you can choose to export as a source name if you're trying to link back to another project. So lots of options here, but those are the two main ways that I would be exporting my files. All right, so as you can see, the PowerGrade is pretty versatile from high key to low key, doc, commercial, music, video, narrative. You have it. It's kind of the look that I apply to everything that I love out of the box. But that isn't to say that you can't customize it for yourself and on-off nodes, inject your influences into it. This is just a pipeline that I find very structurally stable so that your footage won't fall apart as we're working from big to small. Don't be afraid to get in there and try your own things. I really want to get you guys away from thinking about just applying a LUT and hoping your footage looks good out of the gate, and understanding that when you apply a look, is it like, what do you have to do to turn it around? Like, is it too dark? Is it too bright? Do I need to shift the white balance? Because I think there are so many LUT packs out there that show this, like, apply the look and you don't need to color correct anymore. And I'm just telling you, I work with enough industry standard, like people that color grade Mad Max, I work with them, and they have to color correct footage at Hollywood movies at the highest level. So getting good at your craft while using this PowerGrade is going to be more of an asset to you than just thinking, oh, I can click this one button and all my problems will be solved. So learning the thing is very, very important. If you stuck around this far, I do have 5 bonus videos that go even nerdier in depth of what we're able to manipulate in Resolve. So those will be done as separate videos, but I appreciate your guys' time, and hopefully you've learned a little bit more about the capabilities of what color can do, and I'm excited to show you these bonus features. And last piece of advice. I know I mentioned out there that there's not really an industry standard for how things get displayed at your end chain between like laptops and television screens. I will say, if you're ever concerned about how something looks, export a clip or export a still and send it to your iPhone. The good thing about the iPhone is that you can't change the color space on it. So if it looks good on your iPhone at around like 60 to 80% brightness, that's probably the most standardized image you will be looking at. So if I'm ever concerned like, oh, does this color grade look good? I have it on my nice monitor, but not everyone's looking there. I'm always like, does it look good on the iPhone? And if it looks good on the iPhone and it looks good to me, then it's probably going to translate to a bunch of different screens. So that would be my last piece of advice. All right, on to the bonus videos.